Hello, Math 96. This is the agenda for Tuesday, 9/29. We're going to start Chapter 2, the graphing notes. We're going to be in Section 2.1, and we'll be doing these notes for a couple of days. Please go to page 15 and write down your essential question at the top of the page 15. And you can hit pause here so that you can write that down. Okay, so tonight's homework is going to be these three graphs down here at the bottom. And remember, this slide will be at the end of this presentation, so you can come back to it. And I will go over what this direction right here means, to use the pre-printed graph paper in the back of your white note-taking guide for tonight's homework. I will talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so for right now, we're going to do the lecture, and then I'll talk about how to find the graph paper to do your homework. So the graphing examples during these lecture notes on page 15, you'll see this little notation. So it says, now graph the examples from the lecture on the grid on the prior page of your notes. So what that means is I want you to turn your white notebook to page 14. And I pre-printed this page, so we're going to do 4 examples today. So when we do example 1, please graph it here. When we do example 2, please graph here. Example 3 here, example 4 here. Okay, so this is to be used, it says right here, to be used with section 2.1. And again, this is on page 14 of your white note-taking guide. Okay, so these are your lecture notes on page 15. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is graph using a table of values. It's also called a T-chart. So whatever word you want to use there. Oops, sorry. Okay, so your steps. You're going to solve the equation for y. And you're writing this in your notes on page 15 in your note-taking guide. We do have some new students in class, so I just want to be clear. So one of the easiest numbers to pick for your T-chart is -1, 0, and 1 for the x values in your T-chart. Now you can use any number you want at all. So if you're taking some kind of test for college entry, just remember, just try any number. It just so happens that it's easiest to use -1, 0, and 1 often. So that's why we choose that. Okay. And then you're going to plug in the x values, the -1, 0, and 1. You do that to get y. Oops, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. To get the y. All right. So your 3 dots that you get when you plug in -1, 0, and 1 should come out in a straight line. If they don't, then either your math is wrong or you put the points on incorrectly, okay? So now remember, all lines are straight and they have arrows on each line. Arrows on each end, sorry. So no curvy lines. And you should always put arrows on the ends. Because if you don't, then if you remember back in geometry, they taught you segments and arrays. Okay, so we're going to move on. So at any time, if you need to, you should just hit pause so that you can finish up your notes. All right, so the first direction says to solve for y. So I'm just going to rewrite the equation over here so I have a little bit more room. So we went ahead and solved formulas before in chapter 1, so we would be ready for this. So we're going to get y alone when it says solve for y. So we're going to subtract the 2x to both sides. And I'm not putting that negative 2x under 4 because they're not like terms. They can't go together. So I put it off to the side. And that cancels 2x's minus 2x's. So your y would be equal to, I'm going to write the x term first, kind of read it straight up from the bottom. So it would say negative 2x, and then that's a positive 4. So here's our equation. We're going to put that over in our t-chart. And I'm just kind of going step by step here in case you were never the best at graphing, so that you have a chance to really relearn how to plug items in. And also a calculator might come in handy here to make your math go quicker, okay? Okay. So I just wanted to kind of change colors here. So remember I asked you to choose -1, 0, and 1. And so what that means is the x, we're going to plug this number in right here into the equation, and we will get out the y. And when we're done with that one, we'll do this one, and then we'll do that one. And what that produces is these XY points that we're going to plot over on this graphing grid. And remember, this is the X and this is the Y axis. So the X axis is horizontal and the Y axis is vertical. Okay, so let's plug that in. So this equation would say y is equal to -2. And right there for the x, we're going to put that -1. So I'm going to write this down and just change colors for you. So this is where we're putting in the -1 right in here. And then you actually do the math, okay? So the next one we'll plug in as a 0, and the next one we'll plug in as a 1. I'm just doing that quickly so I don't have to keep changing these pens. So this would be a -2 times 0 plus 4. This one, because we're plugging in, remember right here for that x, we're plugging in these numbers that we're choosing. Next one would be -2 times 1 plus 4. And then we have to do that math. Don't forget that there's a negative sign in front of the 2. Okay. So how much is negative? Oh, I knew that was going to happen. So there we go. -2 times -1 is +2 plus 4. That would give us a 6. And we put those two numbers together, -1 comma 6. Into our point. So let's go over and graph that one right away. So we have to graph -1 comma 6. So you start in the middle, and you either go left or right first for a table of graphing. So -1 to the left and up 6. And we're going to make a dot right there. I think for your homework, you're probably going to have to use some kind of colored pencils when we do the graphing so I can see it. Okay. So then the next one is going to be -2 times 0 is 0, plus 4 would be a +4. So our point would be 0, comma 4. Now, there's a trick with graphing this. So we're going to wait to graph that over on the grid because a lot of students graph that incorrectly. So let's just go back and finish the next one. So right here, -2 times 1 is -2 plus 4. That would be a +2. So our point would be 1, comma 2. So let's go ahead and graph that point. So you'd start in the middle, over 1, up 2, and make a dot. So we just graphed this one, right? Okay, so let's go back to this one. So if we're going to draw a line, can't you kind of see the line is going to go right through here? So like I said, this plotting points with zeros always confuses students. Is it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 over here? No, that would be off the line. It's 0, don't move, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see how the dot falls on the right spot. So be careful. I would always plot this point last. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to draw my straight line right through there. Arrows on both ends. And that is how you graph using a table of values. Okay? And when you do your homework, you need to make it big and exaggerated. These are really big, kind of exaggerated dots. Okay, none of these teeny little dots, you guys, I can't see that when you upload your work. So they have to be kind of really big, ugly, exaggerated dots. I should have stopped while I was ahead, huh? Where was it here? 1, 2, 3, 4. I should have stopped while I was ahead. I hit the wrong button on my pen. Okay. I'll put it back in there. And then always remember to try and draw straight lines. For me, it's a little bit hard on this pad, but we do the best we can. Okay, so you're going to graph on that example grid on page 14, right? Sorry, I should have erased this slide. So you graphed that on page 14. Okay, so come back to your notes on page 15. So the reason why I have this equation is because it is often used in college. So if you're going to take science in particular, you just have to know this equation. So it bothers students if they're like, well, where's the number? So it's missing. Like, where's the number back here? This is the same thing as y is equal to x plus 0. If I add 0 to that, it doesn't change the amount any. So if you need to think like that, y is equal to x plus 0, that's fine. So when we choose the x values, it's -1, 0, and 1. The equation is y is equal to x, and if you want to, think plus 0. So remember, you're plugging items in to this x value. So if we plug that in, this would say y is equal to, plug it in right here, -1. If you want to think in your head plus 0, that's okay, it's just -1. So our point would be -1 comma -1. If you plug in 0 for x, it would say y is equal to 0. So the y value is the same thing as the x value. And the last one is plug in a 1. So I'm going to have the point 1 comma 1. Because y and x are the exact same number. So the reason, and I didn't mean to confuse you with, the idea of where's that back number. But like I said, you can add the plus 0 if that's helpful to you, because it doesn't change the amount any, right? What's important is that you understand that this is the basic, they call it a parent function for linear equations. So it's important for you to recognize the graph for college, especially for science. So if we graph those points, I'm going to change colors here. I think this will work. Okay, so if we graph these points, left one, down one, and again, make the dots big, and you should be on page 14. Flip your paper over, your notebook over to page 14 to graph. So -1, -1, 0, 0, over 1, up 1. So the line that goes through the origin is the parent function for linear equations. And this is a very important graph for all science. And so that's why I went over that for those of you moving into some kind of science field. Okay, if you can come back to page 15 so we can do graph using x and y intercepts. If you're not done yet, just go ahead and hit pause and then restart your recording. Okay, so graph using x and y intercepts. The reason I have this here is in case we do a project for linear programming later in the year. So it's not one of the most common ways to graph, but we may need it later on. So your steps. Make sure the equation is in this form. So the x first, the y next, equal to a number. C stands for constant. So basically what you need to have is the letters on the left equal to a number. And they'll be preset up for you. Okay, so to find the x-intercept, make y 0. And then to find the y-intercept, make the other letter 0. So to find the y-intercept, you make the x 0. And then plot 2 separate points on the grid. So the most common thing for students to do in error here is to put, you're going to get a number here and a number here. The most common errors for students to put those together into one point, and that's not what we're doing. So we're making 2 different points, one here for the x-intercept, one here for the y-intercept. And now I'm going to talk real quickly about what the intercepts are in case you don't remember. So you don't need to draw this right now. I'd just like you to listen for a minute. So here's the x-axis, here's the y-axis. If you have a dot right here, that's called the x-intercept dot because it's on the x-axis. If you have a dot here, say, that would be called the y-intercept. So any dot that lies on the x-axis, there'll only be one, is called the x-intercept, and the dot that lies on the y-axis is called the y-intercept. And once you have 2 points, you can draw a line, right? It takes 2 points. So this is the x-intercept, and this is the y-intercept. Okay, so let's do one. So remember now, we'll show our work here, and then you'll flip over to page 14 to graph this. Okay, so is this set up in the right form? Oh, sorry, I wrote a B instead of an 8. Oops. No, I was doing the right thing. So there we go. So is this equation right here, for example, 3 set up in that it's called standard form? It is. The x, the y equals a number. So we're going to find 2 things. One, the x-intercept, then draw a wavy line, and then a y-intercept. Okay, so if you're going to find the x-intercept, you make the other letter 0. So I'm just writing the equation down from right here. So you're going to make the y worth 0. So let's plug that in. So 4x minus 8 times 0 equals 24. And then you just do the math. So right here, what is 8 times 0? Negative 8 times 0 is just 0. So 4x minus 0 is equal to 24. You don't need to do anything with 0. You can just cancel that. So it says 4x equals 24. So the x would be worth, oh, let me show that math there for you. You would divide on both sides, right? And I didn't want to skip a step. Divide on both sides by 4. Your x would be equal to 6. Now, when you make a point, it's an xy point. So the x is 6. And how much was that y that we made right here? It was worth 0. So be careful. So that's the point we're going to plot. And I got to make sure you get in the right spot. So the x-intercept is at 6. So when you plot this, oops, when you plot it, you go on the x-axis to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and make the dot. Okay, now we're going to do the same for the y-intercept. So I'm just writing down the original equation again. If you're looking for the y-intercept, you make the other letter. If you're looking for y, you make the other letter 0. So we make this 4 times 0 minus 8y equals 24. So if you want the y-intercept, you make the x 0. That would just be 0 minus 8y equals 24. We don't need the 0. You're going to divide on both sides by -8. So your y would be equal to 24 divided by -8 is -3. So we need a point. So this time we made the x worth 0 and the y came out to be -3. So we're going to graph the y-intercept. And that's going to be at y-axis. So we're on this line. Let's go to the middle and it'll be -3. So count down 1, 2, 3. And you're going to draw a line straight with arrows on the end. And no short stubby lines. Your lines always go across the entire grid. That's important in math, especially in this chapter. You can hit pause if you need to. Okay. So you go ahead and try this one. If you can hit pause. And then you can come back. Oops. Okay, so for the x-intercept, you should have made y 0. The x would have been 4. If you're looking for the y-intercept, you make the x 0. And you should have gotten 12 fifths. Oops. So how do you graph 12 fifths? So if you have a calculator, you can enter 12 fifths, enter, and it should give you back a decimal. Or, just to review, how many 5s go into 12? 2. What's left over? 2. So it'd be 2 and 2 fifths. Okay, so it's 2 and a little more. So let's talk about how we graph that. So the x-intercept, this one, is over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The y-intercept is 2 and 2 fifths. So you go to the middle, you go up 2 and a little more. That's all you have to do. Unless you have a graphing calculator, we just know it's above 2. Okay. So I just wanted to review there how to graph improper fractions. All right. Moving on. Okay, so we're all done. You don't have any fractions on the homework to graph, so I just wanted to review that real quickly for graphing fractions. So see pages 141 to 179 right now in your white note-taking guide. So please turn your note-taking guide to page 141. Okay, so you see a page that looks like this. So on page 141 tonight, so start with the first page. So your homework tonight, use page 141. And it says these pages are used to use for homework or classwork if we did anything in class. So please show your work in the empty space and then graph darkly so that an image you send electronically will show your graph clearly for grading. Okay, so so on page 141, we're just going to put section 2.1 because there's no page. I wasn't happy with any of the problems in the textbook. Okay, so you can just put section 2.1. I guess it was a little silly for me to keep rewriting that, but Anyway, section 2.1, and then you're going to do the 3 problems that are going to show up in just a second. So you're going to do the problem here, graph it. Do the problem. I only gave you 3 for tonight. Here, graph it. So show your work over here and then graph it. Okay? So I expect you to write down the problems that are on the next screen. That's these. So there's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. All right? And then I would not tear out that page. I don't think so. I think you should leave it in there until we're all done with the graphing in 2.1. Okay, so tonight's homework, please don't upload anything to the digital workbook yet, okay? We're going to start a new digital workbook later on this week, Thursday and Friday. So use the pre-printed graph paper on page 141, in the back of your white note-taking guide for tonight's homework. Do this one first, then do this one, and then do that one. Put it in that order, and then that way when I go over it, everybody's paper will look the same, okay? So do this one first, and number 2 and number 3. This one you're going to graph with a table of values like our first example that we went over. And then this one you're going to use that x and y intercept where you make, if you're looking for x-intercept, you make y0 kind of thing. Okay, and then I also put in here that page number again, page 141 to 179 for us to do our graphing homework. Okay, email me if you have any questions, okay? We're done for today. All right, thank you, you guys.